On the 2nd of June 2024, the first Class 805 Avero trains entered service with Avanti West Coast. I was lucky enough to be one of the first people to go on these units, and this got me thinking, have Avanti West Coast improved since the video I made on them back in January 2024? And if not, what improvements are we likely to see in the upcoming weeks and months with the new trains entering service? If any improvements at all, that is. Well, in my previous video on Avanti West Coast, which you should watch before watching this, I mentioned the various issues the operator had, and how they were facing huge cancellations due to lack of train crew, as well as suffering from poor reliability of the West Coast Main Line's infrastructure. At the time of that video's release, Avanti were reportedly very close to being stripped of their franchise and being taken over by the Department for Transport as an operator of last resort. However, they just survived, and still have their contract until 2026 at the earliest, and 2032 at the very latest. Since that video, a lot has changed on the rail network, but has Avanti service? First, let's recap some of the issues that plagued Avanti 6 months ago. Perhaps the main one was their reliability. Services in 2022 and 2023 averaged an on-time running rate of just around 40%, with 9% of services cancelled. This was lower than in 2018, despite running 30,000 less trains per annum. Delays due to Avanti themselves as a company rose nearly 3 times in 2022 versus 2021, and public complaints were just shy of 50,000. Avanti's new contract has allowed them to increase reliability slightly, although gathered huge criticisms, with their punctuality score being at just 46% at the time of their new contract being announced. For example, Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham suggested that the new contract and delays were unacceptable, with Avanti West Coast saying the delays and cancellations were beyond the company's control. The main reasons for these terrible performances were due to their staff, well, lack of. Avanti could not staff their trains, and many cancellations were due to lack of available train crew, which should be blamed on the Avanti management. Has this improved though? Well, not hugely. Despite coming to agreements with staff for historic leave agreements and overtime workings, as well as going on a large spree of hiring new staff, service cancellations are still pretty high, with services so far in 2024 averaging around 7% for their cancellation rate. 2.3% of cancellations are due to shortage of staff. The worst hit route is the North Wales coastline, where a whopping 15% of Avanti services were cancelled in April, 8.2% due to a shortage of staff. One improvement though were the hidden P-code cancellations, which Avanti West Coast used to secretly cancel trains the day before that they knew they couldn't run. This has gone down drastically since the government called Avanti out for doing P-coding cancellations, and, in the last month, just 27 trains were P-coded, and this was due to an overhead line power issue at Kings Langley, which is why P-coding should be used. Also, 89% of services now arrive within 15 minutes of schedule from April 2023 to 2024, up from 2022. However, the fact that only 10% of all services are still more than 20 minutes late is not at all a good thing, with Avanti's punctuality certainly not amazing. But why? Well, staff shortages play a role, as aforementioned, but the West Coast Main Line's infrastructure reliability has not been good recently. Every week something goes wrong along the line, it seems, whether that's a landslip like there was at Rugby a few months ago, derailments like the one in Carlisle in May, or problems with signalling, overhead line electrification, and points failures, which are a common occurrence week in, week out. At the time of writing this, there was currently a signal failure near Euston, delaying all services by around 20 minutes, and this isn't a rarity. So, Avanti's reliability is not great, but running a large intercity franchise does mean reliability will be hindered, with Virgin Trains not actually having great reliability themselves. But it's not just staff shortage and reliability that's making Avanti's service poor. Staff happiness has also been a huge historic issue, with many Avanti staff being reportedly unhappy with their workplace environment. This is still the case to this day, with it being announced on the 1st of June that all RMT Avanti catering staff would be striking from the 7th of June. The RMT suggested that the staff were unhappy at Avanti changing shift patterns at a short notice, laying off staff, and enforcing overtime. The RMT suggests that this has meant their members have been unable to fulfil family commitments or other major commitments such as medical appointments, with it having a, quote, detrimental effect on the catering staff's morale. This sadly hasn't been a rare thing either, which I touched on earlier, with Avanti's management being blamed a lot for how it treats its staff. There have been multiple issues regarding staff rotas and overtime since taking over the franchise, with these still occurring in 2024, as seen by strike action. In 2022, Avanti blamed the RMT staff for illnesses, suggesting that they were unofficially striking. The management has definitely been something that has been criticised by the industry. Although lack of catering staff will not have an effect on Avanti's punctuality, they will severely hinder passenger experiences, meaning that first-class passengers will not be served food on trains that can reach up to 6 hours in length. Once again, another example of how the DfT and a train company's parent business are more interested in profits than staff morale and a decent service. However, there is one good thing about Avanti's management, and that's the fares. Okay, hear me out on this one. Fares in the UK are ridiculously expensive for rail travel, and I'm not denying that, with Avanti being no different here, but their superfare scheme has allowed passengers to travel from London to the Midlands and the North for as little as £9 per way. The scheme works by allocating unreserved seats as superfare seats a week or two before departure to ensure that all seats are filled on the train. The scheme doesn't allow passengers to choose what time they travel, and they must be booked at least a week in advance, but allows passengers to travel from London to Carlisle for under £30 and cheap tickets to Liverpool, Birmingham, Preston, Glasgow and Manchester, as well as other stations. The scheme was originally just for a year, but with over 50,000 superfare tickets sold, Avanti announced in late April that the scheme would be extended, as it brought many passengers onto the rail network who would have ordinarily taken the cheaper airlines or rail companies to head north or south. It still doesn't take away from the fact that services are still super expensive, but isn't everything nowadays? At least Avanti are trying to do something to make fares cheaper, which other rail companies aren't, even if their reliability isn't amazing. Avanti's rolling stock improvements could also allow a case to be made to suggest that Avanti have improved. Since my video in January, Avanti have ramped up with their Class 390 refurbishments, with now all Class 390s bar the odd one or two unit having been fully refurbished, with the refurbished units being a huge upgrade when put against the unrefurbished ones. However, what's more exciting is the introduction of the new Class 805 Hitachi AT300 Evero trains, which are introduced on the 2nd of June. The Class 805s will replace all the Avanti Class 221 Super Voyagers by December 2024, with them being bi-mode and thus better for the environment versus the diesel-only Class 221s. Also, despite not being able to tilt, the 805s can run at 125 miles an hour thanks to new regulations in multiple unit top speeds, meaning journey times should be decreased rapidly, especially with the 805s having impressive acceleration against the 221s. The 805s also provide much more capacity than a Class 221 due to longer carriages and will bring Avanti's fleet to a standardised interior style, with the new 805s having similar interiors to the Pendolinos. Although the 805s are already in service, running a few diagrams a day currently, the all-electric Class 807s are not. These are rumoured to be entering service in December 2024 or May 2025, with the Class 807s being the largest upgrade, in my opinion, to Avanti's fleet. Whilst the Class 805s will be a direct swap with the Class 221s, the 807s, which are basically a 7-car Class 805 and are electric only, will allow for Avanti to run more trains towards Liverpool, Birmingham and Euston. Liverpool will eventually be run as 2 trains an hour up from 1, whilst Birmingham will be 3 trains per hour across the day, with a 7-car Class 807 having a similar capacity to a 9-car Class 390 due to its much longer carriages. Although they are AT300s and in the same family as the GWR and LNER IETs, which have received lots of criticism, the new units are nice in my opinion and will provide passengers with a better service. That is, if they run. The units will have teething problems and will still be affected by staff shortages, especially the Class 805s on the troubled North Wales Coast services, which has the most cancellations on Avanti's network. However, the Class 390s aren't the most reliable nowadays, with the units leading to several cancellations, such as the day I'm recording this, where up to 4 services have currently been cancelled due to stock needing more repairs than usual. Regardless, Avanti's fleet is some of the best in the country, with all their units, including the 221s, being of a high standard and being pretty reliable once on the rails. Also, in 2 or 3 years' time, when the new fleet of 805s and 807s have been fully introduced with new timetable changes, Avanti West Coast will run more services and will have more capacity, with HS2 also allowing to take the strain off the London to Birmingham local services off Avanti. However, I'm looking quite far in the future there, perhaps 10 or 15 years, and currently Avanti West Coast are scheduled to run the services for HS2, meaning we could see similar problems with staffing. Although this video has been shorter than many, don't worry, I have longer videos in the works. Can we say Avanti's services have improved since January 2024? Well, personally, yes. Although reliability is still far from perfect, it has improved, but services are still cancelled and delayed, mostly due to infrastructure or staffing issues. Avanti now has successfully introduced the first few Class 805s, which are a huge improvement from the Class 221s. The Class 390 refurbishment scheme has nearly finished, which is a huge improvement compared to the unrefurbished 390 and a credit to the company, managing to refurbish so many units in a short amount of time. What hasn't improved though is staff morale, with strikes still ongoing nationally, and catering staff announcing new strikes. There's certainly still issues with Avanti West Coast, their management, and the Department for Transport as a whole, but Avanti themselves are improving, slowly but surely. However, it will take a good few years until any huge progress is made, and who knows, by 2026 we may have a nationalised operator instead of Avanti West Coast. Regardless, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Avanti West Coast. Have you had any good or bad journeys with them, and do you think they'll improve? Do let me know in the comments below, and do consider liking, subscribing, and joining the channel. Special thanks to my first class member, Callum Martin Bell, and my business zone members, Andrew Bowen, Anthony Harris, Craig Mitchell 43, and Smudgy Cat. Also thanks to Devaruni for his donations and membership. Do consider joining for cool perks such as access to videos early and your names at the end of videos. Thanks so much for watching. Apologies for the shorter video today, but you may as well check out my Twitter, Discord and Instagram in the links below whilst you're at it, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.